Great. All right. Let's get back to it then. You still see my screen? Thumbs up? The presentation, anyway? All right. So just some session norms here. And you guys are all probably experts on this by now. We'll use the chat function. Mute your mic when you're not needing to, you know, utilize that kind of audio communication. But please, if it's something that you want to ask, or feel free to unmute yourself. Sometimes mute becomes very oppressively silencing. And when you are talking, especially if you're comfortable, to turn your camera on, just so we can get a little of that human connection going. And if you are having difficulty with your Wi-Fi, sometimes it's because that extra video that is streaming. So when you don't need to use your video, you can shut that off. So what are we here to do today? Quite a bit, actually, but don't freak yourself out too much. So one of the things we want to do is just kind of check in with ourselves about where we are in terms of evaluating online information and the credibility of that information, right? We want to take a look at some of the challenges that not only students but also teachers and professionals of all sorts, ranges, have when we are navigating on information online. And we want to learn from professional fact checkers some of the best practices that they utilize in navigating the web, right? This presentation is entitled Lateral Reading, but that's one skill set that the Stanford History Group has kind of put together lessons around. It's one of the main ones, but we'll take a look at some others like click restraint and some other best practices when we are evaluating online information. And of course, we always want to be in dialogue with one another around, what we're thinking, what we're wondering, any type of questions that come up around, any pushback as well. Like, does this really work, right? So today is really about discussion of ideas, right, and strategies and tools. And to do that, we definitely are going to have some time to explore the curriculum that the Stanford History Group developed in partnership, partly with us and some other districts around the country, and take a look at some of those lessons and get to interact with them, right? I would also like to have time for you all to, while you're exploring, start thinking about, if not already, integrating and refining some of the lessons that you are thinking about for this upcoming year. All right. So got to talk about the why. So I'd love to get a sense of why you're here in this session today. Why, out of all the sessions, many of them very high quality, why did you choose this one? So if you can take a moment to think about that, enter it into the chat. Hmm. So some of you, it seems like, have already heard about lateral reading and may have had some training on it in the past, maybe looking to brush up and refine. Definitely some folks who are looking to bolster our students' ability to research, right? Those research skills, knowing that they are going to use the internet for some of that. Kind of forced to now, right? Lies. lies, right? And just the the abundance of lies, as it seems. Um, Overall, like general media literacy skills, right? And potentially critical media literacy skills. And we'll talk a little bit about that today as well. Fake news, always one of my favorite phrases, right? All right. So I want to share with you a little bit of my whys for today, and thank you for sharing some of yours. And I think there's some parallels here. This, this has been an interest area of mine for a long time. So I've taught for a while about critical media literacy and the best practices, and how to teach critical media literacy skills to students. And so one thing that's always concerned me since I've engaged in this work as an educator is just the reality of media consolidation, right? And in particular, not so much in the sense that like, oh, we have so many channels and there's really not too much to watch, right? And so our choices are limited, but more so in terms of like news. And so, I want to just direct people to most of the images that I put in slides have a hyperlink that directs you to the actual original source where that image was used. And so you can click on this, and this comes from our friend Bill Moyers, who I always love listening to and reading about his work. But just this idea that, local newsrooms are shrinking and have been shrinking for quite some time. And so where people get their news, trusted news, reliable news, from local on the ground journalists, that landscape has changed over the years, drastically so. And what it has created is a situation where we have different places where we get our news now, right? So as opposed to going down to the newsstand and talking to the person selling you the news and about the headlines and reading and going through the pages and what have you, now most folks get their news online for sure, and often through social media, right? And we'll talk about some of the problems that presents. We've also recognized that there's this interplay between, the news landscape and our political system, right? And in particular, in recent years, we've noticed more of this interaction, and it's not always been the greatest interaction, right? So where we have, intentional disinformation campaigns in a political sense being leveraged not only by foreign adversaries, quote unquote, but also internally, right? We can see the type of information that's being shared in the service of political ideology, really not helping the common citizen to understand situations better, and in order to be able to take informed kind of action, right? And so we hear a lot about polarization, right? And as a history teacher, I can assure you that our country has always dealt with polarization and different competing ideologies and viewpoints, right? And it's always struggled with that at times, right? And out of struggle has often come what some would say, and I would also agree with, is opportunity, but also like victories in terms of more equity and justice, right? So there has definitely been times where those kind of tensions have brought out maybe some of our better natures, right? But it's also created a situation where, and more recently, and maybe possibly more drastically, folks who don't agree with each other can't even stand to be in the same room, let alone country, possibly. So hyperpolarization in our country, I think, is another one of my whys for wanting to learn more and help others learn more about this work. And then, of course, our favorite spiky ball image. We are in the middle of an unprecedented global pandemic, right? And so just when it comes to information about this particular virus and this particular global public health concern and situation that we're in. We have a great need right now to understand information around this virus and the policies that are being enacted in response to this virus. And the situation that we kind of see here makes that ever more difficult, right? So these are some of my whys that I'm bringing today in putting this presentation and experience together. So I'm wondering how familiar folks are with all of these kind of terms. So I don't usually front load vocabulary like this. You know, I'm not going to have you go and define all of these different terms, but I am just kind of getting wondering where folks are at with some of these. Is there any that are completely unfamiliar to folks? You can go, feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions or offer any definitions to see if we can have some common conceptions here.
What is click restraints and LOT at the bottom?
Yeah. Okay, those are very important ones. So click restraint is one of the skills that's embedded in this curriculum that Stanford developed, and we're going to take a look at what that looks like. And there are some specific lessons and activities that Stanford has created to help teach kids the skill of click restraint. And so it's pretty the term explains kind of itself, right? It's the restraint to click on something, right? But when we take a look at that, it's like, well, why would people want to click on this or that, right? And so it's kind of helping folks understand the design of the internet and the layout and how it's designed intentionally to get you to click on certain things, right? But with regards to assessing online credibility, it plays a certain function, right? So your ability to restrain yourself from clicking on certain things that might, you know, not get you to where you want to be. And it's actually an IoT, and IoT stands for the Internet of Things. And later on in the presentation, towards the end, I'll tie back to that. But good questions. Other questions or thoughts about these? And there's other terms that are important into this work, but these are some things that came to mind that I thought would be helpful if folks knew or would ask questions about, because I think they are relevant in this particular topic.
Are you going to cover all these terms?
Not in great depth, but this would be a time now if you're unfamiliar with one of them. Or any
hey,
of them.
Mark, what
Yes.
is it? What are deep fakes?
Deep fakes, right? So deep fakes are manipulated either images or videos that often combine artificial intelligence algorithms and are created to throw people off, right? So they're intentionally created to manufacture a different type of reality, right? So if you're looking at a video and it just seems like too crazy to believe, but the actual images that you see are edited and superimposed in a way that your eyes are telling you, well, it looks real, right? But it requires you to kind of do some sourcing, right? And kind of reason through something. So, but that's the concept of deep fakes, is that they're constructed so well and often not with much human construction or remixing, as it were, that you actually have machine type of learning technology being able to create deep fakes. Does that make sense?
And SEO?
SEO is an acronym for search engine optimization. And if you don't know what that is, it's definitely something that I think we should be teaching our students about. And it relates to how companies and organizations and even individuals can use search engine optimization to get their, whatever it is they're trying to put out into the world, their product, their website, what have you, to come up more frequently in people's online searches, right? And so we'll talk about, and that relates to kind of the skill of click restraint, right? When we notice, we all know that, and we do it ourselves, right? We type in something into Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever your search engine of choice is, and you're looking for something, and you're doing it because you want it to be quick, right? And so we know that we most of us stay on the first page. If not, if we don't even get to the bottom, we're looking at those top kind of hit results, right? Depending on what we put into the search kind of field, search engine optimization plays a role in influencing what the top findings are. And a couple years ago, one of the Tech Tuesdays, Rob Appel and I collaborated on a presentation around Google search, and I can share that with folks, and Rob can also share it. And he did a really good job of just kind of breaking down how search works. And so we can talk a little bit about that too. But it's just an important concept for students to understand, right?
Yes, I would like to have that shared. That would be great. Thank you, Mark.
Awesome. Anything else for folks? Great. All right. So there's a lot, right? But we're going to try and streamline it and keep it manageable. And I think this particular field and curriculum program that Stanford has created is a really good way to help do that. So let's give you all a chance, okay? Again, the image is hyperlinked on the slide, so you can actually get to this particular website and article. And I just want to know, as you kind of take a look at it, what your opinion of it is. Is it a credible source? And then I'd like you to respond either yes or no, or I'm not sure, by going to this also hyperlinked Slido presentation. As part of the presentation, you enter in the 4-digit code, and then we can take a look and see what people think. So I'll give you a couple minutes, nothing too huge, but just based on what you're looking at and whatever kind of skills and thought processes you're bringing to today's presentation, what do you think about this source?
And Mark, somebody had a question too about filter bubbles. Would you mind explaining that while other people are looking up this new topic?
Yeah, filter bubbles are, so the easiest way to understand it, if we're all living in bubbles of information, and those bubbles are constructed digitally, at least, by a lot of different things. How we, like, what sites we go to and how that feeds kind of the algorithms and the cookies that are placed, right? But essentially, a filter bubble, it as a whole concept, is just the collection of the information that you leave in your digital footprint, and how it constructs a kind of information ecosystem and bubble that you're in. And so there's a great TED talk on filter bubbles, but one of the examples they use is that you do the exact same search as your friend, right? And you enter in, into the search field the same things, and then you get different results. And whether you're logged in using your Google account or wherever you're doing your search, just by the mere fact of like tracing like your habits online, or that whatever the habits or the history of that particular device and where you're at also impacts filter bubbles, right? So if you're doing a search in mainland China or in a country in the Middle East, you're going to get different results based on a lot of different variables, right? And a lot of those variables are built into algorithms, right? As people consent to having information that they may or may not know being shared with whatever entities are interacting with online. And that's including not only the websites you visit and the companies that make those websites, but also your internet service provider, right? The government that controls the communication around your locale. Hopefully that was helpful. I can share some more resources on filter bubbles as well. Okay. So I shouldn't have showed this. I don't want to influence people. So we'll go back to there. We got about half of you all are taking a look at this. Again, not too much time. I don't. What's your initial reaction, right, of this particular source, this article? Give you about another 60 seconds. Natalie, it is similar to an echo chamber. Yeah, when you have intense filter bubbles, you're definitely in an echo chamber, right? Thanks, Alex. It's a good point.
Welcome.
20, 30 seconds left. All right, and I do hope that the link is working for everyone. And if you didn't get a chance to weigh in on this source, don't worry, there'll be others. We're definitely going to do as much hands-on as we can. So before we go there, I just wanted to ask anyone to chime in, whether they put no, not sure, yes. Just walk us through a little bit of your thought process. Any takers? What are you thinking when you're looking at the site when you went to go to it?
So, Mark, I'll comment. This is Edgar from Salinas High. Yeah. So
Hi.
when I was initially looking at this article, I kind of questioned like what would be the reasoning to lie about such a topic. So that kind of gave me some leverage about thinking about possibly there's no reason to lie for this article, and then it just made references to other sorry, excuse me, to other texts. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So within the article, pointing you to some different sources that also might look, credible, and then just the question of like, well, why lie about this particular topic? Okay, those are some good thoughts to have when you're taking a look at this. What about some others? Maybe someone who wasn't so sure, or some things that maybe made you question, some maybe red or pink flags that came up for you all. .org, right? And looks like, Sarah, would you say you employed a little lateral reading in Googling the author?
Yeah, so I checked the author to make sure that she is who she says she is and attended a university. And yeah, she's a biologist. So that helped. And then also
Okay.
the .org was helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Mary. Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure many of us have heard, if not also taught about, looking at some of the URL tags, right, to help students figure out whether or not a site is worth spending any time on, right? Miriam says she took a look at the About section, right? Juan mentioned that it could be clickbait, right, with a fun title. Yeah. And the mentioning of ads, right? But there's nothing inherently political whether you believe the story or not. That is true, okay? And not all misinformation and disinformation necessarily is politicized, although I'm sure there's some, kind of group out there that is very passionate about Dolphin's ability to make friends and what that means for who you should vote for. But overall, this is a pretty credible site, okay? And there's many different techniques, as you can see, to kind of implore as you're trying to figure that out, right? And so that is what we're trying to get students to do. Okay. Now, knowing that teaching best practices, we often need to be explicit and modeled. That's what we're going to try and get at, right? I appreciate you all sharing some of your ideas about that. What about this source? Again, this is hyperlinked. Comes from one of my favorite social media platforms, Twitter. I know not everyone's a Twitter fan. But take some time. You can hyperlink to the actual source, and then what do you all think? And let me know. This is the first time I'm really diving into Slido because I don't know where my poll everywhere went from Google Slides, but you should be able to chime in on this poll as well. And if not, then no worries. We'll just move on and let's talk about it. So can I get someone to verify whether this poll is active or not? Oh, there we go. Yeah, it's hard these days to even talk about tweets in the same sentence as credible sources. Statistics, right? Does anyone recall your statistics class in college or high school? It's that double-edged sword of math, right? Somebody employed some lateral reading. Don't know how successful of the actual author of the tweet. So if you're not a Twitter user, but maybe use some other kind of social media platform, we know that folks who have a lot of followers or who or what some of our students would call influencers. They often have a little symbol that you can see quickly that says whether or not they're at that status, right, or they're verified. So one comment here, even though he's verified on Twitter doesn't necessarily mean that he's correct or credible, and that's very true, right? But often looking for the verifiable symbol on a platform like Twitter is helpful in some sense. Some folks were looking for this statistic in other publications. Following the links embedded in the tweet, right, eventually led to a Wall Street Journal source, right? Sometimes it's about what you're interested in, right? And I think that's one of the issues, right, is that we're constantly being flooded with, opinions and retweets and reposts and reshares. It's like, well, what is worth like slowing down and taking a look at, right? So what is a news source? That's a fundamental question, right? And while Twitter is not a news platform per se, there is a lot of mainstream news and other news that comes through Twitter, right? So a lot of people, including myself, do get news and what I would see as credible news in many cases through Twitter, right? But ultimately, it's a social media platform, right? Yeah, with one of the aims of connecting people across different locales. So we'll move on. Let me know if the sound works once it gets going here. Or maybe not. Give me 1 second here. All right, so I'm going to come back out of the presentation real quick and see if we can play the video this way.
How are you taught to evaluate the credibility of online sources? Everyone knows that information on the web may be shallow, incomplete, inaccurate, or heavily biased, and many of us have been taught to explore the features of a website to assess its credibility. You may have learned to ask, is this site a .com or a .org? Does the site incorporate advertisements? Was it written by someone who appears to have appropriate expertise? Are there citations to supporting evidence or research? Is the information current? While sometimes useful, these questions can also misdirect you because they rely on superficial markers of credibility and authority. For example, some .org websites may be reliable and nonpartisan, while others may be partisan political action groups or even promoters of widely debunked conspiracy theories. On the other hand, some of the most authoritative news websites are .coms with advertisements, such as the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. Relying on superficial markers to evaluate credibility can be problematic because most websites won't say, I was designed by a biased political organization with an intent to manipulate you. Or, I'm leaving out important information that might give you a more objective perspective on this issue. Or, I was written by an uninformed person with no relevant expertise. So how do we improve our ability to evaluate websites when we know that some individuals and organizations may be working hard to misrepresent themselves and misinform us? By using a skill called lateral reading. Lateral reading is a simple concept used by professional fact checkers and other savvy thinkers to judge the credibility of unfamiliar sources. While many of us judge a website by reading vertically, scrolling up and down to look for markers of credibility, or perhaps clicking on links within the site, fact checkers jump outside the site, using new browser tabs to seek additional information about the site's credibility, reputation, funding sources, and potential biases. In other words, fact checkers read laterally or horizontally across multiple web pages to get a big picture view of the site they're evaluating. They use Wikipedia, credible news sources, and other references on the web to understand what a source is and how credible it might be. They don't just take the source's word for it. For example, this news story on heavy metal music fan culture is on phys.org, a website that may be unfamiliar to us. But if I open up a new tab, I can search for information about phys.org and find out that it's a news aggregator that often republishes science news from across the web. I can also verify that the research discussed in the news story originated from University College London and PhD anthropology student Lindsay Bishop. By doing some homework on the source through lateral reading, we get a much better sense of what this source is and its level of credibility. We can also begin to think about its strengths and limitations from a more informed point of view. In this case, we might decide the information is reliable and a good starting point. But we might also want to look beyond this brief news story and find the original research or other more in-depth scholarly information. With lateral reading, you can move beyond the superficial aspects of website evaluation and develop a more nuanced and more complete perspective on the credibility of your sources.
All right. So hopefully you were able to hear that. There we go. So speaking of Wikipedia, what do you all feel about Wikipedia? Credible? Why? Why not? That last author of the video made a claim. How do you feel about that claim with this particular source? And for time's sake, we don't need to weigh in on unless you want to, but we can talk about it real quickly. So you can feel free to unmute yourself and share your either experience with Wikipedia, your opinion about whether it's credible or not. What are some thoughts out there? So somebody's mic is Miriam. I think your microphone or internet connection is got a filter on it that makes your voice sound like you've had a helium balloon. I don't know. I've never heard that before. Maybe if you try.
I like to start on
either
Wikipedia,
typing
but
it
then I
in
like to
or
look at other sources.
there we go. Okay, so you use Wikipedia as a starting point, but maybe not an end all be all credible source. Okay. All right. Some people are saying that because anyone can go in and edit information, that it's not a reliable source for students to use. And that you don't, Wikipedia doesn't require expertise on a topic for you to be able to edit the information. Other thoughts out there? And again, feel free to type or use the mic. So some folks like to use the site's use of citations. It seems like there's definitely some caveats for folks in terms of how they use or encourage the use of Wikipedia. So this is actually from the Civic Online Reasoning site.
Many educators tell students they shouldn't use Wikipedia because it's full of mistakes and anybody can edit a page. If that's the case, then why, in our observations of professional fact checkers, was Wikipedia one of the first sites they often consulted? It's true that there are mistakes in Wikipedia. A 2005 study from Nature found that the typical Wikipedia science article had 4 mistakes. But the same study found that the typical Encyclopedia Britannica entry contained 3 mistakes. In contrast to a print encyclopedia, Wikipedia allows for changes to be made almost immediately and for information to be kept current. And it's not true that anyone can edit any Wikipedia page. Many of the most viewed entries are locked, which means that only high-level Wikipedians can change them. To tell students not to use Wikipedia is to deprive them of one of the most useful tools on the internet. Instead of teaching them to avoid it, we should be teaching students how to use Wikipedia wisely. When fact checkers go to Wikipedia, they scan the body of an article, but what they are really looking for is the goldmine of sources at the end of the article. For example, the American College of Pediatricians has an official sounding name and logo. It's easy to think that it's the main organization of pediatricians in the country. But even a quick scan of Wikipedia shows that not to be the case. But the real evidence comes at the bottom, in the references Wikipedia requires in substantiating a claim. In a matter of seconds, students can find in these references a letter from Francis S. Collins, the head of the National Institute of Health, condemning this small group for misrepresenting his research findings. This brings the trustworthiness of the American College of Pediatricians into question. And fact checkers don't just examine one source, they look at multiple sources. Used properly, Wikipedia is an invaluable resource, especially as a launching pad for evaluating online information. We need to teach students how to use it wisely.
So here you can see that through the research that the Stanford History Education Group did in studying how fact checkers navigate and negotiate online information and determine credibility, that Wikipedia is actually a useful tool as long as it's, you know, like any tool, taught on how to actually use it, right? And so I think that's an important thing because often I hear students coming in, and when I direct them towards Wikipedia as a starting point or even as an ending point, if you look at the citations, they often lament about how they've been instructed not to use that at all. And so here we have some perspectives of why that might not be as helpful, right? So jumping into kind of the architecture behind the Civic Online Reasoning website and the curriculum, we're basically looking at 3 main questions, right? Who's behind the information? What's the evidence? And what do other sources say? And so that implores lateral reading, it implores some other skills around click restraint, some other skills that your colleagues have already demonstrated, depending on what type of information you're looking at. So whether you're looking at a social media site like Twitter, you know, how do you utilize some of the markers of Twitter, and in combination with skills like lateral reading to kind of verify, you know, who's doing the tweeting. Is it a verifiable account, or is it does it look like it's a bot account, which, you know, are fake accounts that aren't even real people? You know, are you following the links inside the social media posts, and what are other sources saying about particular links, right? It's not just one thing, right? But it's a combination of things. But these are the 3 main questions that we ask. So this is actually hyperlinked right here to get you to the Civic Online Reasoning site, where the lessons are have been curated and presented. And so What I'd like for you all to do is try one of their lessons out. In particular, there are 3 social media claims that are hyperlinked in the document that you can get to by clicking on um, this particular image, right? And we'll all be on the document together. And so that's going to be a little unwieldy. I know it's always fun to have every student in the same class on one document. But I'd like us just to kind of go and click on the hyperlinks and see and utilize some of these skills that you're being introduced to, maybe for the first time, or that you're here to refresh yourself on. And again, give us some insight as to your thinking about whether or not the social media posts that you're looking at are credible, right? And so what that looks like is some of you are already on there. Great. Jesus, I've gone ahead and posted that presentation link again in the chat. And then for those of you who are exploring, as Stephen and Amanda are modeling, what strategies did you use to verify the posts, and overall, what do you think its trustworthiness is? So there's some good sleuthing happening here. So a lot of practicing of these important skills, lateral reading, as well as some other skills. Appreciate those of you that are sharing your insights via that shared document. Another 2 minutes, and then we'll bring it back and have a brief discussion. So there's a doc, Trudy, on slide 17 that's hyperlinked to the yellow image, which has 3 social media posts that we're all just trying to collectively evaluate, first individually and then sharing our insights on the shared Google Doc. Herman, so in a little bit after this particular portion, I'm going to direct you to the actual core website. And so there are many lessons around different topics, and we'll go explore those together real quickly, and then you'll have some time to explore on your own. And so there's definitely some more scaffolded lesson plans that help introduce lateral reading to students. I'll also say that when we get to the website, or before, just those of you familiar with Jonathan Green and Crash Course History, Stanford in the core curriculum developers are able to partner with Crash Course, and so there's a 10-part YouTube video series that Jonathan Green hosts about civic online reasoning and all the different skills, including lateral reading. So the video I showed you was created by a teacher who just decided to make her own video, which I thought was nice. But there's a lot of short clip videos, including the Jonathan Green kind of crash course on civic online reasoning series that you can find on YouTube that also kind of outlines step-by-step. They're a little longer, so I didn't want to share those. But once we get to the website together, you'll see some of the lesson plans that can be easily adapted and kind of outline a step-by-step kind of procedure. So in bringing it back in the next 30 seconds, so obviously one of the cool things about being on a Google Doc is that you can kind of have multiple people working on it at the same time and just kind of sharing their thinking process with others. And, you know, without bumbling over one another and erasing and modifying each other's texts. But it's a cool way just to have it all in one place at first. It also is a tool to help model for students who might be struggling a little more at first before we send them off into the digital wilderness alone to demonstrate some skills that we are trying to assess, right? Some mastery over. And so just bringing it back, this is a doc you guys will have access to, but it's also, as you can see, modified or just copied, and it comes from an actual lesson on how to verify claims on social media from this particular website. So I'm going to transition back to kind of presentation mode just for a brief second, and then give you some more time to explore just the actual site, right? So I'm going to present Um, and can I get someone to unmic or unmute and see if you can see the presentation?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
Perfect.
Is my
Thank you
mic
so much.
working now?
Yes.
Yay! Okay.
No more helium.
I rebooted.
So I think you know, one thing that I mentioned in the workshop yesterday is, and that folks have been asking about, you know, regardless of our own comfortability with regard to like social media or which platforms we prefer or not, right? We know that the fact is that not only students, but just the majority of people are getting information that they are utilizing to inform their kind of daily actions through social media, right? And so I think now is the time, broadly speaking, to really re-examine how schools treat social media with regards to, you know, just their use in classroom lessons that help students analyze a myriad of different things, right? And also the next step would be, you know, how to leverage social media as a tool for production, right? That where students we know are going on social media platforms to actually produce and create multimedia artifacts, and can those artifacts and the platforms they were created on be helpful in helping us assess, you know, what students are thinking about learning and able to do, right, in terms of an assessment. So that being said, I whoops, yeah, want you to explore. Sorry, can you guys see my chats there? Is that something you can see? 'Cause that's annoying me, but I don't want it to annoy you, so I'm gonna stop presenting and present again, just a Chrome tab actually. All right. So before we go and explore a little bit, I just want to outline that when you get to this website, which is hyperlinked in this particular image right here, it's a good idea to kind of, you know, explore the different areas. Again, they got videos and they got lesson plans developed, but in order to access all the lessons, it requires you to create an account, which is free, but that enables you to go to any of the lessons and actually download them. Oh my God. Download them, copy them, modify them, and they're all kind of Google Slides and Google Documents, right? So if you're not burnt out on signing up for one more curricular resource with another account, I would recommend that. If not, then you can still view the website, but you might not have access to all the lessons. So what I'm proposing is that you go to the core website. And again, that's hyperlinked down here, and take some time exploring some of these lessons and these videos, and even some of the research that has gone into making this these resources, and then come back at 2:50 so that we can kind of debrief and you know, answer any questions that you might have, share any insights that you might have discovered, and as well as any action plans. So in this time, those of you who are maybe more familiar, or you get sparked with an idea and you want to start, you know, designing and refining some of your lessons already, you can use this time to do so as well. So this is kind of your playtime sandbox. Any questions before we get started on that? And then we'll come back at 2:50 together as a group. So I'll still be here. I'll just be muted. And if you need to step away for a bio break or something, you can do that. Questions, comments? All right. Explore away.
Hey, Mark, are you still there?
Yes, still here. Sorry.
It's okay. I signed in about 10 minutes late. Is there any
Okay.
way you can send me the sign-in link?
Oh, for the session?
Yes.
Yeah, it's in. You have the presentation, right? It's in
Oh,
slide
yeah.
one. There's a,
Oh, slide one. Okay, thank you.
yeah, no worries.
All right.
Hey, folks, I've been sharing a few links that were asked for previously in the presentation in the chat, and I just want to give us a 10-minute time awareness before we bring it back to kind of close out for the day. It's a 5-minute warning, so if you need to get up, stretch, use the restroom, grab a beverage. I won't tell you what beverage to grab on a Friday afternoon as we wrap up here soon, but we'll be back in about 5 minutes, and then we'll take it to the home stretch. All right, we're gonna bring it back in about 60 seconds here. Okay. So hopefully you had a chance to thoroughly explore the Civic Online Reasoning site and take a look at some of the curriculum that were developing and get some time to think about how you might integrate it into your upcoming courses this year. I do want to give some time just for some debrief or discussion of what you all thought about some of those resources, any other questions you had from any point in the presentation up to this point. And then before we leave and I have you evaluate the session, there are a few other ideas for consideration as we expand beyond civic online reasoning and evaluating information online, and think about media literacy in a more expansive kind of viewpoint. So there's a question and answer slide that you should be able to see, and let me know if you can't. But you could also feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question or a comment or some thought to share about anything that we've covered thus far, or anything you feel like you have questions about.
Mark?
Yes.
I ran into some videos that said they were not approved for the district. And then on the other side, it said approved. So what is that?
Are you referring to videos on the YouTube on the site?
Yes.
So I know that if you're on your district account and you are trying to access some videos on YouTube that haven't been approved, you as a teacher should be able to still view them. And then often you have the option, if you know it's an educational video, to approve it in our specific district domain. But I thought that most of the videos there, not all of them, you're right. Some of them, they actually take you to YouTube links. But most of the videos there are able to, even though they're on YouTube and they're YouTube links, they should be able to be watched embedded within the site. If there is a video that you can't access or that you're wanting to share, but you don't have the privileges to approve it, then just let Brianna or Jennifer know, or myself, and we'll communicate with IT to get that video accessible not only to you but your students. Other ideas? Let's go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Carlos. Other questions or thoughts?
Hi there, Mark. So I just had a question. So I was kind of looking at some of the lessons available, and I was just wondering, in terms of having presenting to students the issues in a balanced way, in your experience, do you feel like the lessons are tailored to, more on presenting the issue, in a balanced manner, or is it more of like for the sake of research? Because I don't know, I just feel like in this particular module that I looked at, it was just really kind of weighing heavily on, the pro side versus the con side. So I was wondering if maybe you could speak to that.
Yeah. So in my experience of taking a look at these resources and in working with the Stanford History Group, it's definitely really focused on the skills. And while they definitely have examples in terms of just the political spectrum of left or right or conservative or progressive, they do have examples from kind of both sides. But it's, I think, unfortunately, and folks, may argue or push back, but I think what we see more often is like specific types of misinformation from one side of the political spectrum. But the site and the resources themselves, while it definitely is trying to train students in having their political ideology shaped by practices that are informed with the evidence, right? It's not necessarily like a one-for-one type of thing, and I think that's just reflective of just the reality. I think there is a well-documented, kind of reality of kind of false equivalencies, right? And then this notion of like one side needs to be counterbalanced with the other side. But often what we find is that one side has kind of flooded the conversation or the media sphere so much that it's really not a balanced situation to begin with, right? But in particular to this website and the resources, it's really more about like leveraging the skills, right? And so one of the things I like about the lessons is that you can switch out actual sources, right? If you feel like there's a need to balance them more, but that then would require you to finding different sources that you felt met that requirement. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other thoughts or questions? Or ideas on how you might integrate this into what you're teaching in the upcoming year? We're coming at the end of a long week, and we're not even all officially back yet. Well, one thing I hope is that this opens up a dialogue that continues in our district. I know that ever since we were part of the pilot program initially and helping to get some of the research and the lesson development happening, there's been a growing interest in this particular sphere. So I hope to keep that going. And so what I'm anticipating is that many of you are going to discover new and more efficient ways and more effective ways and creative ways of integrating, civic online reasoning instruction into your courses, right? So I'm hoping that we continue to share those out. So a couple of things before we get going. Those of you who are, interested in going deeper into like critical media literacy, these are just some folks who have influenced my particular work, and three of them I've gotten a chance to actually work with. And again, these images are hyperlinked to either their specific websites or resources. So Dr. Ruha Benjamin, is she's a scholar of media and technology studies, and has written a lot about the intersection of race and technology, even arguing that race itself as a social construct is a type of technology that's been used to oppress Black and brown folks throughout the ages. And her recent book, Race After Technology, really takes a deep look into just the current technologies and future technologies and their ability to continue to strengthen some of the structural inequities and oppressive mechanisms that we see in society, right? So anything from like facial recognition technology, to geolocation technology and how it's been implemented not only in the past, but how it could be implemented in the future, and how we need to kind of recognize that, and any kind of movement, as we're seeing right now, to disrupt racial inequity and oppression needs to have technology as a major consideration in that. In the middle, Dr. Safia Noble out of UCLA is another really good book where she presents a lot of her research around search results, specifically with Google, and outlines an argument that they're not value free, that algorithms are designed by people, and people have biases, and people have been impacted by certain narratives and ideologies that shape the way they think and work and create. So she has a wealth of data to support her argument that that search kind of politics, right, and in particular with Google as a company, have created a situation where the actual search algorithms kind of replicate and recreate stereotypical racialized perceptions of certain groups, in particular Black women. So that's a really good book if folks are interested in taking a look at that. And then over to the right, Jeff Scher, good friend of mine and former colleague at UCLA, and Doug Kellner, who's also at UCLA. I am a Bruin, sorry if you're a Trojan. But their work, which is also hyperlinked here, was kind of fundamental in setting up what we call critical media literacy and how to teach it. And so in the next slide, you have their framework that was created with some additional questions that are powerful to have students begin asking when they're looking at anything really. When you take a look at media, not just social media or digital media, but photographs, images, just these kind of fundamental questions to understand from a critical perspective what you're looking at and how you can think about it deeper. So that's the framework that I've used in the past with teachers and students. If you really are the kind of person that likes to go down the rabbit hole, this is Mark Goodman. He is a thinker and author, and one of his books that I read scared the hell out of me, called Future Crimes, and just kind of really pulled back the veil a little bit more about just how connect technology and the internet in particular is being used for not so great purposes. So if that's your thing, this is a little talk you can take a look at, and he's written some books and articles that are worth taking a look at as well. And if you think that today was well spent, but you need maybe some more time, or you'd like to share this kind of work, whoops, spelling error, with some colleagues at your site, your CERT, or within your PLC, Joel Breakstone, pictured at the left, is the director of the Stanford History Education Group, and was key in our collaboration as a district in developing these lessons. And he has offered to work through any type of presentation or workshop or webinar that any folks in our district would want to get into. So you could contact myself and or him, and we could set something up for a PLC meeting or a future PD virtually, obviously, for the most foreseeable future. And I'll promise to show up in Bitmoji form if I can. And then last but not least, I thank you for your time here today. I hope it was valuable. And if there are things that we can do to make a training like this better, more responsive, then I'd love for you to click on the feedback image, and it should take you to today's session evaluation. And so if you could be so kind as to do that for me and for our ed tech department, that would be very helpful. And I also want to say that this is one arm of kind of skills-based, instruction that we think is very necessary in these times. And one of our amazing colleagues at Rancho San Juan, Patty Vargas, who's one of our teaching librarians, her and I have been wanting to put together a training that brings these skills, as well as knowledge of the amazing kind of resources that we have at our disposal in our district, not only with our colleagues and their expertise, librarians. We should reinvest in collaborating with librarians, but also the databases that we pay for and that we have access to. And so when we're talking about research and getting better at it and getting better at teaching and supporting them in it, this notion of database research versus open online research, research is what we've been talking about, right, through Google and whatnot. So leveraging those two things together, I think, could really be powerful in creating students who are able to navigate not only the open web, but also just libraries and look for things and be able to find things and construct them into ideas and arguments that will be informed and then lead to hopefully what I'm really passionate about on the flip side, which is civic action, right? So that they actually are shaping our society in a way for the better. So I would recommend if you're in a high school level, you can get in contact with one of your teaching librarians, and they can definitely be a colleague to collaborate with in terms of like developing lessons and even teaching them. And then also ask questions if you don't already know about some of the databases that our students have access to help them with research. So that is all from me. I'll stick around a little bit if anyone has any questions, but I thank you again for your time. And if you could just take a moment to fill out the evaluation, that would be awesome. Also going to end recording now.